The bride who slapped the wrong woman. The smack echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. 300 guests froze, watching the 64-year-old waitress stagger backward, hand covering the red mark on her face. "You incompetent fool, you ruined my $50,000 dress," screamed Victoria, pointing to champagne drops on her silk gown. "What kind of place hires people like this?" The waitress, Donna Ruth, stood with quiet dignity despite the hysteria. "Someone get this person out of my sight before I call security," Victoria spat into her microphone. Donna Ruth bowed silently and began picking up crystal shards. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from deeper pain. What no one knew. 22 years ago, this woman had found an 8-year-old boy abandoned in the rain in Detroit. A boy she raised, who called her mom. A boy named David Thompson, the groom. As Victoria continued her show, Ruth looked up toward the staircase. There stood David in his Armani tuxedo. Their eyes met, and in that glance she saw everything. He had witnessed it all. The woman he'd just promised to love had humiliated the only person in the world he truly loved. 22 years earlier, David had been a skinny 8-year-old in the rain outside a Detroit shelter, clutching a photo of his dead parents and a one-eyed teddy bear. Ruth, leaving her hospital shift, found him. "Hi, sweetie, are you hungry? I don't have any money." "Who said anything about money? Come with me." David slept on her couch that night. Ruth never made the adoption official, couldn't afford lawyers, but David became her son. She worked 3 jobs for his private school, up at 4 a.m. to clean offices, then the hospital, then restaurants. David watched those hands, always working to give him opportunities she never had. "When I grow up, I'll get you a big house," he said at 10. "You don't need a big house. Just be a good man." At 16, David won a full scholarship. Years later, he discovered Ruth had worked 4 jobs to send him $200 monthly. David excelled in business. Within 5 years, he became a partner at an investment firm. Within 10, a millionaire. At 30, one of the country's most respected businessmen. His first $1 million contract bought Ruth a simple home with a garden. "This is too much," she protested. "This isn't even the beginning of what I owe you." 2 years later, David met Victoria at Ruth's house during Friday dinner. Victoria was a client's daughter who barely hid her surprise at the modest home. "I thought you lived in that fancy Manhattan building." "I do, but I have dinner with my mother every week." Victoria looked at Ruth serving dinner. "She's cute, authentic." David didn't catch the condescending tone, he was in love. But Ruth did. In following months, Victoria rarely joined, always having social engagements, and making comments about people who don't know their place. David began noticing how Victoria changed her tone with employees. And now, watching Victoria laugh with friends about the clumsy maid, David realized he'd spent 2 years planning a wedding with a complete stranger. David stood motionless for 23 seconds, enough time for gratitude to turn into cold fury. In the kitchen, Ruth sat applying ice to her bruised face. Marcus, the head chef, approached. "Should I call the police?" She shook her head. "I've been through worse." But David wasn't letting it pass. 20 minutes later, he found Ruth still helping pack leftovers despite being injured. "Mother," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't make a scene. Today is your special day." "It was my special day." He held her hands. "I need you to go home and rest. And Mom, don't watch TV for the next few days." Ruth studied her son's face. There was cold determination in his eyes. "What are you going to do? Show 300 people who they really applauded today?" David found James at the bar. "I need you to record a conversation. Discreetly, good quality. Once this gets out, there's no turning back." The turning point was lost when she raised her hand against my mother. David approached Victoria. "Honey, can we talk alone? About that incident earlier." Her face closed. "What incident?" "With the waitress. I want to understand." Victoria pulled him to a corner. James positioned himself nearby, phone recording. "It was just an accident. She stained my dress and I reacted." "You slapped her." "So what? She was a clumsy waitress." "People like that need to know their place." David felt something break inside. "People like that? You're being dramatic." She was just an old black woman who didn't know what she was doing. She probably doesn't even speak English properly. Someone had to teach her boundaries. These people, David repeated quietly. Exactly. Everyone in their place. We have our class, they have theirs. I'm glad you understand. That's why I love you. You have enough class not to mix with riffraff. David looked at Victoria as if seeing her for the first time. I understand perfectly. Thank you for clarifying. James pocketed his phone. Did you get everything? Every word. Clear audio. Perfect video. How many journalists do we have on our contact list? About 15. Why? And lawyers who specialize in marriage annulments. My mother sacrificed 20 years for me. Today she was humiliated by the person I chose to share my future with. The party continues for 2 more hours, enough time to set things in motion. 2 hours later, David stepped onto the stage. The microphone echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making this day special, he began. Victoria smiled, expecting a traditional speech. But before we close this evening, I'd like to share something important. Today I witnessed something that made me rethink the meaning of family, respect, and character. James positioned himself near the doors, broadcasting live. Mrs. Ruth Silva has worked 40 years serving families at events like this. She's a 64-year-old woman, honest and hardworking. Today she was assaulted for staining a dress. The room exploded in murmurs. Victoria tried to stop him. What makes this disturbing is that the person responsible considered it normal to hit an elderly woman because she was just a waitress. Victoria walked toward the stage. David, stop it. Donna Ruth Silva isn't just a waitress, Victoria. She's my mother. 300 people froze simultaneously. My adoptive mother, who found me orphaned at 8, raised me alone, worked 3 jobs for my education, and sacrificed her youth so I could be here today. Cell phone cameras rose everywhere. James's livestream had over 10,000 viewers. 2 hours ago, my wife, the woman I just promised to love, slapped the woman responsible for everything I am. Victoria tried to speak but couldn't. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating. So I'll let Victoria explain herself. He tapped his phone. Victoria's voice echoed through the speakers. She was just an old black woman who didn't know what she was doing. She probably doesn't even speak English properly. Someone had to teach her boundaries. These people need to know their place. We have our class, they have theirs. Gasps rippled through the room. Victoria stood frozen, surrounded by horror and contempt. That was taken out of context. She cried. The context of you calling my mother riffraff who needs to know her place. 36 minutes, David announced. That's how long it took for Victoria's contracts to be cancelled after the livestream started. Companies don't like associating with people who assault elderly people. Victoria rushed to the stage. You can't do this. We're married. David pulled an envelope from his tuxedo. Actually, we're not. These are annulment papers. Marriages based on fraud can be annulled immediately. You spent 2 years pretending to be decent. That's emotional fraud. Besides, assaulting the elderly is a federal crime. My mother filed a complaint. Your mother? That woman is not your real mother. David approached her. She's given me more love in 20 years than you managed to simulate in 2. Who's more my family? Ruth appeared at the entrance. She'd returned for her purse. David walked over. Mom, come here. With infinite tenderness, he offered his arm. Together they walked down the center of the hall under absolute silence. This is Mrs. Ruth Silva, a retired nurse, volunteer at 3 charities, and the most dignified woman I've ever known. To me, she will always be Mom. Guests who'd fawned over Victoria now bowed respectfully to Ruth. The wedding is off. Security will escort you out. As Victoria was led out screaming, Ruth touched her son's arm. You didn't have to do this for me. David kissed her forehead. I did. Some lessons can only be taught publicly. Phones vibrated simultaneously. Bride assaults elderly woman, discovers she was groom's mother. 3 million views in an hour. Victoria had lost not only a husband but a reputation built over years. 3 months later, the video reached 50 million views. Victoria's influencer career evaporated. She now worked as a saleswoman in a suburban store under her maiden name, praying no one would recognize her. David's company prospered, receiving floods of customers. He appeared on 3 business magazine covers in 1 week. Ruth became a respected figure but declined most lecture invitations, preferring her volunteer work with abandoned seniors. Victoria's criminal case resulted in 6 months community service, ironically serving meals to elderly people under Ruth's supervision. A year later, David remarried a doctor he met at a charity event. The simple ceremony was held in Ruth's garden. The best revenge wasn't humiliating Victoria publicly, it was building a life where genuine love overcame superficiality, where character surpassed social class, and where a 64-year-old woman who worked her entire life was treated with the royalty she always deserved.